Good morning and welcome to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of Wednesday the 19th of April 2023. My name is Councillor Ian Massey, and I'm the convener of this committee. I will now introduce the top table. From my far left is Councillor Grant Stewart, my vice convener. Next is Miss Jessica Guild, committee officer, and Mr. Jeff Fogg, solicitor. On my right is Mr. Christian Smith, Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager, Mr. Sean Panton, Team Leader, Major Applications and Enforcement, and joining us online is Mr. Paul Williamson, Team Leader, Local Developments. Usual housekeeping: as this is a hybrid meeting, members joining virtually are reminded that if you leave the meeting during the consideration of any application, you are unable to participate or vote on that item when you return to the meeting. This also means that if a member loses their internet connection during proceedings of any item, they should not vote on that item. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you are leaving the meeting, or if you have lost your connection and are therefore unable to rejoin. Whilst we are operating a hybrid meeting for the proceedings today, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat box to attract my attention, which all members should have access to. Q for question, C for comment. I will now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and attendance of those in the chamber and online.
Thank you, convener. We have apologies from Bailey McLaren with Bailey Ahern substituting, and apologies from Councillor James with Councillor Forbes substituting. We've got 3 members online. I'll ask them to confirm if they're present. Councillor Forbes?
Yes, good morning, I'm here.
Councillor Reid?
Yes, present.
And Councillor Waters?
Present.
Thank you. All other members are present in the chambers, convener.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they have any declarations of interest? Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I have a non-financial interest in item 521, the first local application.
Thank you. No more. Minutes of the meeting of the 20th of March. Can we agree the minutes of the meeting of the 20th of March? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. Yes, at the last Planning and Placemaking committee meeting, I used the word ghettoisation. I've been made aware that this word is viewed by some as being offensive, so I would like to apologise here and now, unreservedly, for using it. I won't be using the word again, obviously.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. Deputations, can we agree to hear deputations on item 523?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, move swiftly on. Major applications. This is an S42 application to amend condition 19 and 20 cycle and scooter parking of permission of 21/00096/FLM North Muirton Primary School, US Place, Perth. And to introduce the report is Mr. Panton. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and good morning, councillors. The first application on the agenda today is a Section 42 application for the new Riverside Primary School in North Muirton. Condition 19 of the planning permission, which was granted in May 2021, requires a secure waterproof cycle parking facility for 94 cycles to be in place prior to the use of the new school building. Condition 20 requires a secure scooter parking facility for 30 scooters to also be in place prior to the use of the new school building. Where the proposed cycle and scooter parking is to be located is where the existing North Muirton Primary School building is sited. The plan is to keep the existing school building operational until such time that the new school opens. This therefore means that it is not possible to provide the cycle and scooter parking facilities in time for the new school opening, and as such, the wording of the conditions require amended, hence this current application. It is now proposed to have temporary arrangements in place until such time that the permanent scheme can be erected following the demolition of the former building. I will now take the committee through a short presentation to detail the changes. Here we have a location plan showing the site. The site is within the Northmuirton residential area of Perth. The site is accessed from US Place off of Butte Drive. Next slide, please. Here we have the proposed site plan as approved. The new school building is now in advanced stages of construction. Next slide, please. On this plan, the red arrow shows where the permanent facilities are to be provided. You can just make out a red dotted line of where the existing school building is. As seen, the permanent location is on the footprint of the existing school, and as such, it is not possible to erect the structures until the old school building is demolished. The yellow arrow shows where the temporary facilities will be sited. It is worth noting that the temporary facilities were requested by the planning service. I will now take the committee through a series of photographs taken only a couple of weeks ago to show the current progress of the school. Here we have the new building when viewed from Argyle Road. The red circle is the approximate location of where the temporary facilities will be located. Next image, please. This photograph shows the school when viewed from the southeast corner of the site, approximately behind where the Kingdom Hall is. Next image, please. This photograph shows the new school building next to the existing school building, which for the avoidance of doubt is still operational. Next slide, please. Again, here we see the relationship between the new building and the old. Next slide, please. This final photograph shows the existing school, and the red circle roughly denotes where the permanent facilities will be sited. It is clear that this cannot be done until the existing building is demolished. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. Can I ask if there are any questions for officers? Seems to be no questions for officers. Where have we got? None of them are coming through. Well, no, there's some coming through now. I apologise there. Councillor Bailey, I'm sorry, I do apologise again.
Thank you very much. My question is why we have left the request for this vital temporary shed to be put up right to the end of the construction, and is it going to cause any delay to the opening of the school, which is hopefully before the end of this school year?
Thank you for your question. No, there'll be no delay to the opening of the school as a result of this. Like I say, where we've asked for the permanent facilities to be located, the existing school is there, and that it has come to light that they now can't demolish the existing school building as quickly as they initially had planned, but the opening of the new school is not going to be delayed by this proposal.
Thank you. And the second part of that is, during your presentation, you said access to the, I'm assuming the permanent structure will be from US Place. I thought that the access to the school grounds was going to be from Argyle Road and not from US Place. The only access to the site from US Place is for the teachers to access the teachers' car park.
Yeah, sorry, I could have made that clearer in my presentation. As seen on the plan in front of you, there are going to be two accesses into the completed school, one from Argyle Road to the south and one from US Place to the north. At this present moment in time, the main access to the school is from US Place, so that's why I referenced that in the presentation, but apologies, that could have been clearer.
Thank you. Bailey Williamson.
Thank you, Convener. I've got a two-part question. Essentially, it's on condition 3, around about all plant and equipment shall be enclosed. But the noise rating is between 7 o'clock and 11 o'clock at night. Is that fairly standard?
Thank you. Yes, as this is a Section 42 application, we're only looking to amend the conditions that relate to cycle and scooter parking. So that condition is one that was applied to the previous permission and as such isn't to be altered today.
Welcome back.
Mr. Reid wants to elaborate on that.
Yeah, this is a set condition set for plant noise, and the time limits are taken in reference to the WHO for nighttime and daytime periods. So your daytime period is from 7 to 2300 hours, and then your nighttime period is 23 to 700 hours. And that's just so that if any plant is running constantly 24/7 during the night, it's covering both periods. Excuse me.
Thank you. My second question is in relation to condition 4 about no direct illumination of neighbouring land. Do we have a level about what that level of illumination should be? I've noticed that 1 or 2 construction sites aren't using white lights anymore. They're probably using green-blue lights. So.
Thank you. Yes, I'll pass to Lynn to answer that. But just before I do, just a reminder that this is a Section 42 for conditions 19 about cycle and scooter parking, and we're not amending any of the other conditions. So that was attached to the original permission, but I can pass to Lynn, who can maybe clarify further just for the avoidance of doubt.
Hello, yeah, again, this is just a set condition, standard condition, and as you state, there is different lights, so different lights will have different lux levels. So you know this covers all types of lights with different lux levels. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Councillor Waters, you have a question?
Thank you, convener. Just in relation to the temporary bike and scooter part, just to check that the temporary one will be for both the bikes and scooter, and what the capacity of the temporary one will be, i.e. it will be sufficient to meet the current demand within the school. Or the new school as it will be. Thank you.
Mr. Salman, can you answer that?
Good morning, committee. Indeed, officers within Transportation and Development had several discussions in regards to this. So in terms of the temporary provision, it's 30 cycle parking spaces and 30 scooter spaces. In terms of the permanent provision to support the new school, it will be 94 cycle spaces and 30 scooter spaces. And that's viewed as being adequate to support the level of development. I would also highlight, in terms of the National Roads Development Guide, there is no minimum requirement or maximum requirement for scooter parking. So this is beyond what is required in terms of guidance.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, you have a question. Sorry, Councillor Waters, you wanted.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I was just going to check, but I'm pretty positive officers would have checked the capacity for the new school and just they'll have figures. But thanks for that answer.
Councillor Anderson.
Just a quick one. Just checking up these scooters and bicycles. There will be non-motorised models.
Yes, these are intended for the children of the school, so I would assume there will be non-motorised models.
Thank you. I see no further questions. I'll just give it a second just in case it's not come through in mine. No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Just a motion to move the paper. I think it is really just a timing question on this. It doesn't affect, as we've heard, the opening of the school. So I think it's just a simple thing to approve it. So I move to approve the paper as written. Thank you.
And seconder, Councillor Lillingworth.
Happy to second, convener.
Do we have an amendment? No amendment. Do members have any comments on the report? No comments. Therefore, the planning permission is granted subject to the conditions in the report of handling. Councillor Brown, you're leaving at the moment. Okay, let's move on to the next one. That's the erection of a dwelling house land north of S Bank, 55 George Street, Blair Gowrie. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson.
Thank you very much, convener, and good morning, councillors. The next application on the agenda today relates to the site within the settlement boundary of Blair Gowrie on George Street, where planning permission is sought for a fuse split in order to erect a new dwelling house with the associated creation of its own garden ground and vehicular access. This site has been the subject of a number of previous applications, with two previous applications for the erection of a dwelling house refused. However, in this instance, amendments to the design and site layout are considered sufficient to allow a positive recommendation in relation to this application. I will now take the committee through a short presentation to deal with their proposals. Next slide, please. This first slide shows the aerial view of this part of Blair Gowrie, with the site located on the western side of George Street, between its junctions with Quay Street to the north and Newton Street to the south. Next slide, please. Here we have a plan which shows the existing and proposed site layouts together with the proposed floor plans and elevations. The site plan outlines that the proposed dwelling would sit back from the street, albeit slightly forward of the applicant's property S Bank, which is number 55 George Street. Garden ground would be provided to the front and rear, as well as two off-street parking spaces. The dwelling itself would comprise a shared living, dining and kitchen on the ground floor, together with a shower room and utility room on either side of the front entrance, two bedrooms and a bathroom on the first floor level. Proposed materials include the use of natural stone to the front-facing elevation and a slate roof finish. To the gables and rear elevations, the walls would have a light brown wet dash finish to match the existing adjacent house. Next slide, please. On this next plan, the upper image shows the existing street scene, including the existing gap and domestic garage that would be lost as part of the proposals. The middle image shows the street scene complete with the proposed dwelling and how it has been designed to tie in with the height of the adjacent dwelling and other properties in the vicinity. Lastly, the final image at the bottom shows the wider street scene between Newton Street and Quay Street. Next slide, please. This last plan shows the proposed drainage details for within the site, including connection to the public foul infrastructure and SUDs for handling of some of the surface water. Since the preparation of the committee report, Scottish Water have subsequently confirmed that they are willing to accept some surface water to the combined sewer following rainwater harvesting, water butts and porous paving, as this would result in a betterment to the surface water discharge rate. I will now take the committee through a series of photographs. Next slide, please. This first photograph shows the existing 1.5-storey dwelling house, S Bank, of traditional design and construction, an existing driveway and drop kerb to George Street. The garage beyond the car in the photo would be demolished to make way for the new house. Next image, please. Next, we see 49 George Street, which is located at the corner of Quay Street to the north of the application site. Again, the existing dwelling is of 1.5 stories and has a parking area directly off the street. Next image, please. This photo is taken from within the site, looking towards Esk Bank. This illustrates that the site has always been separated off with a rubble wall. Next slide, please. Again, from within the site, this is a view north to 49 George Street and gives an indication of the window openings on the adjacent property. Next slide, please. This final photograph shows the view northeast towards Quay Street and the property Langham and the adjacent joiner's yard, which is directly west. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I'm always a bit confused by the term brownfield. Was this site previously occupied by another building, or what makes it a brownfield site?
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. From that perspective, the site has always kind of formed part of the existing garden ground associated with 55 George Street. The use of brownfield. So just to check, is my mic unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, that's fine, sorry. Yeah, the use of the term brownfield generally applies to sites which have been previously developed. In this instance, there is obviously an area of hard standing. There is obviously a garage within the site as well. Therefore, it would be reusing land which has been developed in some form, albeit it is presently formed part of an existing garden ground. Notwithstanding, what we're assessing here is the principle of the siting design and layout of an infill site within the existing settlement boundary.
Councillor Forbes, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. There's clearly some connection with the house next door. I think the introduction said it was them that was making the application. Do we know if this is likely to become a short-term let accommodation, or will it just be sold in the open market?
As per the application submission, this is for the erection of a dwelling house. That is the basis that we are assessing it at this time. If it were to be a short-term let, it would have to be appropriately licensed. But at this time, we are assessing it as a dwelling house in its own right.
Thanks, convener. I've got a second question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was regarding the water issues, and I think you said there would be some water butts and such like for storage. And I'm not familiar with how that works. I mean, I know what a water butt is, but the water will just sit in there and eventually have to go somewhere. Does it not always eventually end up in the public sewer if it's in a water butt? The water butts get full and they have to be emptied.
Water butts are one method that they are showing. They have provided a drainage strategy submitted with this application, which has been checked by both Scottish Water and our own colleagues in the flooding team, and they're satisfied with the use of water butts, rainwater harvesting, some of which can obviously be utilised within the site and via porous paving, so that surface water then just goes into the site itself. With some that would ultimately lead to the combined sewer, but it's at a rate that is less than existing surface water.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Anderson, you have a question?
Quick one. Just wondering about the house to the left, looking at the site, East Bank House. Is it listed? Is it category C?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Anderson. As outlined in paragraph 2 of the committee report, the site is opposite two category C listed buildings, which are to the kind of south of the property at S Bank, but S Bank itself is not listed, no.
It's not, no, because I was just concerned about the neutral wall, which seemed to be in a dodgy state on the photographs anyway.
Certainly in respect of that wall, the intention is to undertake repairs to it to make good, but we do have a condition later on in respect of the confirmation of ultimate boundary treatments going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. There seems to be no further questions. Can I ask for a motion? No, in fact, no, I'll tell you what I'll ask. I'll ask for comments first. You get one of these days, everything just goes. Oof. No comments. Now I'll ask for a motion. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I'm happy just to propose that we go ahead as outlined in the plans. I don't see any issue with this.
Can I? Oh, Councillor Reid, you're seconding. Oh, Councillor Ahern, sorry. Bailey Ahern even. This is date. It's just going through worse.
Convener, yes. Bailey Ahern will second it.
Thank you. Can I ask for any amendment? No amendment. Therefore, planning permission is granted subject to conditions contained in the report of handling. Thank you. Can somebody ask Councillor Braun to come back? Okay, we'll move on. The next application is for the erection of a dwelling house in part retrospect at land 40 metres north of East Actor Fernan Aberfeldy. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you again, convener. Next up in terms of local applications today is an application for the erection of a dwelling at Easter Octar to the north of Fernan, which has only been referred to committee in light of an objection from the Glenlyon and Loch Tay Community Council. This site has been the subject of a previous application for the erection of a contemporary dwelling house in 2010, and a technical start was made to that application, which keeps that permission live in perpetuity. This application seeks to revisit the design of the proposed dwelling, and I shall now take you through a series of slides to outline the proposals in greater detail. Next slide, please. This first slide shows the aerial view of the site, which is located on the east of the C449 public road between Fernan, which is 780 metres to the south, and Fortingal, 1.7 kilometres to the northeast. It also illustrates the significant landscape within which the site sits, with the Tay Forest Park to the east and steep slopes of the Lawyers Mountain Range to the west. Next slide. This second aerial slide shows the site in greater detail, with the existing timber-clad cottage towards the centre of the site and Easter Octar to the south. It also shows the forestry tract to the north, which is understood to have been used for the felling of previous woodland which took place. Next slide, please. Here we have a plan which shows the existing and proposed site layouts. This shows that the proposed dwelling house would be located slightly further west, away from the public road, than the existing cottage. It also shows the position of a new driveway, although the access point to the public road would remain the same. New tree planting and landscaping is also shown. Next slide, please. On this next plan, we see the proposed floor plans, with the ground floor comprising a double garage and storage area and gym, with stairs leading to the first floor, comprising a shared living, dining and kitchen area, with 2 double bedrooms at either end of the accommodation. Next slide, please. On this next plan, we see the elevations of this contemporary proposal. The design includes the use of a shallow double pitch roof and zinc-clad box feature windows to the east and west. In terms of other materials, the external walls would be clad in black timber with a black aluminium roof. A flue serving a stove would also project through the north-facing roof plane. Next slide, please. In comparison, this last plan shows the previously approved and extant planning permission for a dwelling house on this site. It too comprised a contemporary appearance, albeit with a curved roof structure, and included fibre cement panels, harling and timber cladding. I will now take the committee through a series of photographs. Next slide, please. This first photograph shows a street view extract from May 2022 and shows the existing cottage set well back from the road, with the rising topography of the Lawyers Hill Range beyond. It also shows the mature boundary hedge to the right-hand side. Next image, please. Next, we view from the public road a short distance to the north, facing southwards towards the site and the neighbouring property Easter Octar. Again, the existing tree cover around the respective sites is evident. Next slide, please. This final photograph is from the south and shows the view northwest towards Easter Octar with the application site beyond. The proposed dwelling would actually sit in broad alignment with the rear of the house in the foreground, thus being set well back from the public road. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Do committee have any questions for officers? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I'm just wondering how visible will this be from Drummond Hill, which is just opposite the property?
What I would say, Councillor Cuthbert, is obviously the separation up to Drummond Hill on the opposite side to the east. You know, is relatively sizable. The context of this site at the moment is sitting within the valley as you head northwards towards Glenlyon and Fortingall. There is the mature landscape surrounding the property, Easter Octar, and the northern boundary of the application site at present, and a combination of the scale of the existing adjacent dwelling, that of the mature landscape immediately around the site, would see very little kind of significant impact. It doesn't stand alone by any means and would be accommodated into the landscape from the perspective of our service.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I've just been scanning again through the paperwork we got for this, and I can't see the reason why the Community Council objected to it. It's probably there and I'm missing it, but maybe someone could just give us a quick explanation, could they?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your question. The single representation from Glenlyon and Lochtay Community Council summarised in paragraph 30 of the report, it flags that the main issues with the proposals are the inappropriate design, which would appear out of place relative to existing buildings and surrounding landscape, and also concern that discharge of wastewater or surface water to the nearby burn could exacerbate flooding at the point that the burn is culverted beneath the existing public road.
Just to follow up on that then, I presume our flooding team have looked at that specific issue about flooding, have they?
Certainly in this instance, we haven't consulted with flooding to this application, but ultimately we're kind of satisfied with the aspects that are put forward in terms of design. Obviously, if it is a kind of private connection that's ultimately made, then it is subject to separate regulatory requirements, and it will also have to go through our building standards and building warrant process.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Braun, you've got 3 questions.
Yeah, but happy to split them up if you want, convener. It depends on how you want.
No, there's no more questions after you.
All right, okay. Just really want to gauge as I understand it, there's an existing obviously planning in place. There's very little difference between the 2 properties, I understand. Is that right? They're both 2-storey, and one, apart from the fact that one is set back further from the road, is that the main difference?
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Yes, the main difference is actually just in the design itself. They're both of a relatively similar scale, height, etc. The previous permission from 2010 used a curved roof solution. This is using a double pitch solution, and obviously with changes to materials.
Thanks. And the second point was, if we turn this down, presumably the original design can go ahead. That's right. Yeah. And my other question, yes. Yeah. And my further question was the general one. This would presumably have been handled with delegated powers as a simple application. Has this particularly means of coming to us encumbered the planners with more paperwork? That would have been much easier to sort it out without this.
The answer to that would have been handled quicker in light of the need to refer it to this committee meeting. Therefore, a decision would have been made much more quickly.
And presumably less paperwork.
Both would ultimately require a report of handling, but obviously, yes, there is the time constraints that would take up with other members of staff who would not ordinarily be involved in a simple application.
Councillor Cuthbert, you have a second question.
.8 metres in height. I'm wondering if that can be conditioned and whether it actually can be enforced, because obviously we're saying it's going to be kept that height.
You might need to repeat your question in full if Mr. Williamson hasn't heard the beginning. Sorry.
I thought it came on. It may come on, gone off again. Yeah, basically in section 47, it says a condition shall require further details. Sorry, the hedge will be proposed to be limited to 1.8 metres in height. And I'm wondering, can we condition that and can it be enforced?
Ultimately, yes, we can control such matters via a condition. Obviously, the question of enforcement, it wouldn't necessarily be something that would be checked on a regular basis, but if it was reported that a breach was taking place, it's certainly something that we would investigate, but we would ultimately hope that the applicant would honour any conditions that are attached to a planning permission and adhere to them in full going forward.
I think in normal circumstances, we would only limit vegetation where it, for example, was within a sight line associated to a junction, etc. Otherwise, we wouldn't tend to get involved in wider landscape and control. It's not something we would want to try and get involved in because, as you indicate, it's difficult to control other than where there is a planning reasoning for it, and that might be such as where it was within sight lines associated to a junction and the such like.
Councillor Cuthbert?
Yeah, if I can do a supplementary just on that, I'm just wondering why one would want to condition a hedge being at 1.8 metres in height. Is it felt the building's intrusive in the area?
I'm not sure there is a condition that limits the height of the hedge to 1.8 metres.
The report states in paragraph 47, the hedge is proposed to be limited to 1.8 metres in height. Am I misreading that?
That's the intention of the applicant, but there's no condition that limits it to that. So the applicant is, I presume, indicating that they would be looking to limit it to that height, probably for their own purposes and just general maintenance of their garden.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I've been up to the site, had a look. My view is that this is going to be very visible from Drummond Hill and from the road. I think the black colour is going to stand out considerably in the area. So my proposal is to refuse on the basis of policy 1A. I don't know if there's a seconder or not.
Sorry, Councillor Cuthbert, was that policy 1A?
Sorry, no, it's 1B, section C.
I think the first thing we should do is ask for a seconder for that. Do you have a seconder? No seconder. So yes, there's an amendment. Councillor Illingworth, you have an amendment.
I think it's a motion to accept the paper and give permission for the development.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Braun, so you're going to second?
I'm seconding Councillor Ingham's amendment come motion, whatever it might be, to go ahead and approve the paper as is. Well, it's second the motion then. Yes.
Right, thank you. Do we have any amendment to that motion? No, none at all. Do members have any comments on the report? No, no comments. Therefore, planning permission is granted subject to the conditions contained in the report of handling. Thank you. Right, moving on. The next one application is for a formation of a forestry track, Auchengarrick Forest, Comrie. And to introduce the report is Mr. Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. This application seeks planning permission for the rerouting of the upper section of a previously approved forestry track. This following concerns being raised over the potential impact of the previous routing on a private water supply and issues associated to which are controlled through separate legislation out with the planning system. So following granting of the previous planning permission, the issue of potential impact of that route on the track on the nearby water supply was investigated by the Council's private water supply team within regulatory services, and potential issues with that routing identified. In response, the applicant seeks to divert the track below the intake for that private water supply to mitigate any impact. Regulatory services have been consulted and raised no objection, with a condition recommended to provide control over the issue. So given the proposals are limited only to a section of rerouted track and not the junction or initial section of the track, it is only the planning merits of that rerouted section which are being considered, with the previous route and junction already benefiting from planning permission. Importantly, the junction which sees the wider track join the Glascory Road has been completed, otherwise the first part of the track having been partially developed to the point where it intersects with the revised routing now proposed. That junction and first section, and in turn the use of Glascory Road for timber haulage, already benefiting from planning permission. I'll now take you through a presentation which provides some detail of the proposals and also includes a number of photographs taken on Easter Sunday. Firstly, here we see an aerial view of the location with Auchengarrick Wildlife Park and the U198 or Glascory Road identified, with the site of the rerouted section of track shown in red. Next. Here we see a plan showing in purple and between points A and B the section of track and junction previously approved and now partially constructed off Glascory Road. Then in red and between points B and C the proposed rerouted section as shown in the previous image. The area outlined in blue is the wider ownership of the applicant and within which forestry activity is to be undertaken. We now move to a third image. This showing a more detailed site plan which, in addition to previously described aspects, shows in green the route of the track previously approved. That's the green dots. Also identified as the location of the private water supply intake and a 50-metre radius around that. As can be seen from the contours, the revised route in proximity to the intake sits at a lower level to mitigate any impact from downward flowing water. Next. This further image shows the relationship of the track and private water supply intake, tank and pipe in more detail. The intake, the circle in blue, the tank, the square, and the linking lines, the pipes between each. Next, here we see a typical road section with the detail of how that would be constructed, levels and various drainage matters. Next, here is the detail of a culvert that would flow below various parts of the track. And we now move to a series of photographs which give an indication of the recent situation on Easter Sunday, as I said. First image here is of the completed junction with Glascory Road looking west towards the property known as Glentarf. Next, this is a closer image of that junction which is completed up to the Glascory Road. The third photo, this looking south and up the hill along the first section of the partially completed and previously approved track. The second section then turns at 90 degrees and runs just below the tree line, although that might not be readily visible to you. At the end of that grouping of trees is the point where the new section as proposed in this application would begin. So next, here we look from the tree line back down towards the junction with Glascory Road, and the next photo, this looks from the edge of the adjacent field where the consent section would intersect with the revised route. This image looking along the second section close to the tree line with the completed junction in the middle left of the image. Next, we then look from the high point along the proposed route not far into the field, again seeing the point of intersection with the existing junction. And we then look from the point where it would enter the field at a point below the private water supply intake and tank. Next. This photo looks from the point of the proposed track down towards the property known as Glentarf. Next. And from the Glascory Road up to the field, which is in the centre of shot below the tree line there, where the track would traverse. Next. And we then return to the image showing the approved and largely completed initial section of track and junction with Glascory Road in purple, the site of the rerouted section in red, and the Wyandod Forest ownership in blue. Thank you, Convener. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. There are deputations on this item, so I'll now pass over to my Vice Convener to introduce the deputations.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call on Ms. Fleming? Before you make your way to the podium, Ms. Fleming, I can remind you that we are discussing the change of the track, and we're not talking about the junction, the planning permission joining the U198. You have 10 minutes for your deputation, and after 9 minutes I'll give you a prompt to sum up for the last minute. So in your own time you can start.
Thank you very much, Convener, and to the rest of the committee for inviting us along today. Excuse me, I am resident at the aforementioned property Glentarf, but I'm here today on behalf of the residents of Glascory Road. Our primary concern is around the water supply, and as you've already heard, the previous granted planning was 15 metres upstream of our water inlet and would have potentially contaminated it. So both the rerouting of the water supply and around the mound, the archaeological mound, are due to the fact that there was no site visit initially, there was no hydrological survey, and there was no archaeological survey. It's no surprise that there's having to be these changes because we are in a very significant Stone Age valley with cup and stone marks only 100 metres or so from the new proposed track. To put this in context, the previous planning went through a process, and that process was including a review by Google Maps, no community engagement, no site visits, and therefore we were unable to comment on the previous planning. The first we were aware of the planning was a letter from Till Hill telling us that the planning had been granted. And we believe that this goes against the Timber Transport Forum guidelines and the Perth and Kinross guidelines for developers, because this is a significant development. It is a new use of a road for a new access into the forest. And unfortunately, the title of this application being a new forest track at Auchengareth Forest was not picked up on the weekly list, or indeed in the Perthshire Advertiser, which is not probably the best form of communication to alert the local community. So to move on to my primary concern, which is the water supply. It states in the application that Perth and Kinross had no records of Glentarf's water supply, which is incorrect. Factually, it was last tested in 2017. So they were aware of the water supply, and had there perhaps been a site visit or engagement, you know, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in right now. So what we're looking for is to ensure that the conditions are in place that protect our water supply. That's our primary concern. The water supply there's an inlet area, a kind of catchment area for it, and then the new proposed planning is actually going to go over the top of our water supply now. So what we're looking for is to see that this will not be degraded long term by the use of, you know, heavy 44-ton lorries going over the top of this supply for many years to come. So we're looking for some kind of condition added that prevents the longer term degradation of our water supply. The other thing that I would like to cover is that in this updated version of the timber transport management form that comes alongside this planning, there has been a change to the working hours. So we held an all parties meeting. We requested a meeting, having never had any previous community engagement. We requested a meeting with the Roads Department from Perth and Kinross Council, and also with Till Hill, and that took place at Glentarf with all the local residents affected. And at that meeting we agreed that the haulage hours would be between 8 in the morning and 8 at night. And we are looking for that to be made a condition of the planning, as currently it seems to have changed to 6:30 in the morning. If you look at the timber transport management plan accompanying this, it's changed from 6:30 till 8. So we're looking for the respectful working hours for all those that are going to be affected by this new significant commercial development. And then the final part, yes, I absolutely understand that the previous planning has been granted, and we were obviously unaware of that and unable to comment and have our rights to comment on that. However, the use of Glascorrie Road and the impact on Glascorrie Road is silent, again, in the planning conditions as to the reinstatement of the damage that will be caused by this new commercial use of this section of Glascorrie Road. It is a long, narrow section. There is 360 metres up a steep, narrow hill with no passing spaces at all. We do have health and safety concerns around that, which we have raised in the form of a complaint to the council. But that still stands. It's not been addressed, and one of these passing spaces that's being used is the entrance to Glascorrie Farm. It's not actually a designated passing space. So we still have concerns around the suitability and safe use of this section of Glascorrie Road, but I understand that that is something that's been previously approved. And then the final thing, really, just to summarise and say, is that, you know, the stakeholder engagement, the timber transport stakeholder engagement really should have taken place with the community before the planning was granted. And if you look at all the documentation that's there and guidelines that are there, we could have avoided the situation that we're currently in by speaking to the community and giving them a chance to put forward their concerns that they have, and it not affect, you know, residents' water supplies. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fleming. Are you willing to, you're saying that you're happy to take questions? Okay, give me a second. Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you. There's a risk assessment of relating to the water supply provided by the developer. What are your thoughts on that risk assessment?
We welcome the changes that have been put in terms of the protection that they're going to do, you know, over the top of the water pipe, etc. But there still was never any hydrological survey completed, so we don't know exactly how deep down our aquifers are that supply our property and what the potential long-term impact of that could potentially be.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. You were talking earlier on about the maintenance of the supply, and there is a condition already in condition 4, which pretty much covers that, I think. Would you not agree with that?
Not on, sorry. It covers the immediate concerns around the construction but it doesn't cover the long-term use of this. And that's our concern. What happens if our water supply dries up in a year, 2 years, 3 years? That is our concern. There's never been any full hydrological survey completed, which would normally be the case in a situation of an entire new extraction route coming out.
There appears to be no further questions, so thank you, Ms. Fleming. Could I call on Councillor Stuart Donaldson? Councillor Donaldson, I'm sure you're aware of the procedure, so when you're ready to talk, I'll start the clock.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Vice Convener, Convener, members of the Planning and Placemaking Committee. In many respects, I want to reinforce the comments made just a few minutes ago by Gillian Fleming, and they're representative of not just the Flemings, but of local residents. I'm not here today to ask you, because we cannot do so, reconsider the original planning application from last year. It is to consider this handling report. Nonetheless, I think things have to be set in the full context. And if you can see here on page 76, it refers to pre-application consultation. But the applicant was not required to undertake any formal pre-application consultation with the local community. And that was indeed the case. And you can see the comments made by Comrie Community Council on page 78, and these are not deemed to be material consultations. And what happened was, as there were no properties within 20 metres of the boundary of the application site, neighbourhood notification letters do not need to be sent. An advert was placed in a local newspaper, and the application was concluded on the weekly list of applications, but no neighbours were notified. And yet, and I think part of the problem here was, and if you look at the weekly lists, it is something, yes, the 3 ward councillors who asked for this to be considered today, the Comrie Community Council did not pick up on, because it stated in the weekly list it was simply formation of forestry track Auchengarich Forest. It did not refer to Glascorrie Road. And I must say, I think there is a need for a change in the legislation, in regulations relating to neighbourhood notifications. That applied, for instance, recently, a few months back, with Crieff Hydro and the clay pigeon shooting application, with noise factors there involved. I think it applies here, and I think it's an area we need to review and look at in depth. And a broader, I think what would have been helpful here, had simply a notice gone up at both ends of Glascorrie Road to let the community know I think we could have taken the process forward far more effectively. In fact, what happened was the first local residents knew, and the councillors and community council knew, was the letter from Till Hill, and we're going to hear from Gavin Mann in a minute, on the 17th of August last year. Now, there has been engagement to some degree since then, and hence this report today. But I really do think there's been deficiencies in terms of proper and effective community consultation and community engagement. But I'm not doubting that the original planning application was done according to the rules and the regulations. Gillian has referred a minute ago, and obviously for the Flemings in particular, the question of water supply is of particular importance. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but for most of the local residents, they are dependent on private water supply from Turlham, the hill that overlooks Crieff and Comrie. But I think it is telling that there was no, perhaps it was not a necessity, but no hydrological survey was carried out. Finally, we do set out it is set out in page 84 about the construction traffic management scheme, and that goes into quite a lot of detail. But I think the point that Gillian again has made is this position is not just about the construction phase, it is about the road haulage phase and the removal of the timber from the site. And there, permission has been given for a full 3-year period. I think there's concerns with the road, with passing places. I think it should also be pointed out, even though it's not an official green route, it is a route that, especially at weekends, is used by a lot of local residents, cyclists and walkers as well. So I think that's got to be taken into account. I think it's also the point, and we'll hear in a minute from Gavin Mann, but the time period certainly in the morning should be at the very least from 8 o'clock, not 6:30 in the morning. So I don't think I've got anything further to add. All the ward councillors, community council do have concerns. It's been deemed a lot of these are not material considerations. Perhaps that is the case under the legislation, but in reality, I think there are concerns here, and I think it should be, and I'm glad it has now finally come to Planning Committee. I would like to conclude.
Thank you, Councillor Darlington. Are you willing to take questions at the time? There appears to be no further. Oh, sorry, my reading is not very good, Councillor Braun. You've got a question.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thank you, Councillor, for your presentation. You obviously made some comments about the procedure, and it's not within the remit of this committee, obviously, to change the way things are done. You agree that it's been complied with the current rules. My question really is to do with the water supply. Is the concern the collection of water to supply, or is it the fact that lorries will be travelling over the track, which could damage the pipework that supplies the houses? Is it that's the main concern, that the weight of lorries constantly going over the track, damaging the pipe supply, or is it the actual supply of water into the houses itself?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I think in particular, it's the very fact that no hydrological survey was carried out, and I think that's important, given that the water supply is a private water supply from the side of Turlham Hill. I think the concerns were particularly noticeable with the Flemings and the residents at Clontarf, and there have been some mitigating measures taken forward, but and perhaps again we're going to hear a bit more from Mr. Mann from Till Hill Forestry, but that is the route, and I think the volume of traffic we're going to see over the next 3 years will be quite considerable, and it is a 3-year period. The construction traffic management scheme, I don't think is quite a concern. It'll happen, it'll cause disruption, but it'll pass. But it's going to be the disruption over the next 3 years, just in terms of very heavy timber lorries going along what is a very narrow road indeed, down that track, long, very narrow road indeed, and with very limited. It's very limited in terms of passing places, and I think that point's been made already. Okay.
So I'm trying. I appreciate what you're saying and the questions were asked, but is it the weight? I've come back to the point. Is that the weight of the lorries going over the track, which may damage the supply pipework underneath, that is a concern? Sorry.
I would say yes, but clearly, as you can see from this report, and it's a question to ask of Till Hill, of Mr. Mann. There has been a change in the actual track. But I still think, I do question why no hydrological survey was carried out, and I think that's quite a key point. Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson, there appears to be no further questions.
Thank you, Vice.
I believe we have Mr. Mann on the phone. Can we confirm that?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Good morning, Mr. Mann. My understanding is that you're not wishing to make a deputation, but you're willing to take questions. Is that correct?
Yes, having heard the other two deputations, I can make a couple of brief comments in relation to matters raised, and then, of course, be available for questions.
Okay, following the process, I shall start the clock when you start your deputation, and I'll give you a prompt at 9 minutes to sum up in the last minute. Okay?
Okay, thank you. So with regards to the timber transport hours of operation, the management plan that has been established as a partnership arrangement between Perth and Kinross Council and the woodland owners served by Glassquarry Road. Obviously, the conditions that are detailed within that are designed to serve purposes of all parties. One of the other woodlands involved, Villa Fortune, which is much closer to the Strohan Road end of Glassquarry Road, was able to request the longer working hours of 6:30 till 8 o'clock in the evening based on their previous experiences, which they claimed did not result in any sort of formal reports of incidents when they were hauling timber from the forest. So that timing was adopted for the plan, but in recognition of the more restricted hours that I had already volunteered in the planning application, and obviously with through discussion with the local residents, the intention for Auchengarrick Forest using this new access road is to operate between the hours of 8 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock in the evening, Monday to Friday. That is as detailed in my supporting statement for the planning application. In relation to the private water supply, the request for hydrological assessment was not deemed necessary, given that the excavations for the new road are expected to be no greater than ½ a metre in depth, and based on the industry best practice which we work to in forestry, it's not thought that such excavations are likely to disrupt groundwater flows. This, coupled with the fact that the new road is now 50 metres downslope of the intake, it was just not deemed to be a necessity. Don't think I have anything else to say, so happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. We have a question from Councillor Illingworth.
Can I ask two questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mann. Two questions for you. How many vehicles movements are you expecting over the course of the development of the site?
In terms of the construction of the part of the new access road?
For the whole, in terms of the construction and for the movement of timber.
So the construction works are subject to a construction traffic management plan, which will be approved by Perth and Kinross Council. I believe that's a condition that will be attached to any permission. In effect, the number of large vehicle movements associated with those works is very small. It is just low loader movements to bring machinery to site. So it's expected to be three or four inbound movements, and then the same to remove those machines from site several months later, once works for the new access road and also the works inside the forest have been completed. In relation to the timber haulage, I've shared details previously relating to estimated tonnages that will be extracted over Glascoy Road from the new access road. And because we are working to a phased felling program for the forest, this effectively sees one timber harvesting operation approximately every 5 years. So the first phase of felling, which is expected to start, well, be undertaken this year, will be approximately 320 lorry loads of timber. Then in 5 years' time, when we come back to do the next phase of felling, there'll be about the same again, 340 loads. And then 5 years later, again, similar number, 350. And finally, in sort of 2038, so 15 years plus from now, we'll be looking at about another 224 loads. So in total, it's probably just over 1,000 loads over a 20-year period. And obviously each load involves an inbound movement of an empty timber lorry, and the outbound journey will be with the full loading of timber.
Okay, thank you. Will any other vehicles apart from have access to this road?
The new access will also be used by light vehicles for contractors working in the forest. So at times of timber harvesting, there'll be sort of 2 or 3 operators accessing the woodland on a daily basis over this route. These will be in small vans or cars, certainly not large vehicles. And then once the harvesting is completed and we move on to other operations such as ground preparation, planting and establishment maintenance, again, it will just be occasional use by contractors coming to and from the forest on the days of working.
Will the public be able to drive the vehicles on this road?
No, the road is a private road for forestry use only, so it will be secured against vehicle use at the Glascoy Road access point.
Thank you.
Bailey Ahern.
Thank you very much. My question is on the private water supply. During your brief presentation, you mentioned that the excavations for the construction of the road would be 0.5 metre deep. How deep is the private water supply?
The private water supply pipe, we understand from discussions with the residents at Glentarth to be approximately a metre down, half a metre. That's to be confirmed in a sort of pre-works meeting with the resident.
So the second part of that question is, if you're not sure how deep it is and it's a metre, how can you assess that there's going to be no damage? You've not done an impact assessment. You've not done a hydrological survey. So who's assessing that long-term damage is not going to be done on this pipe?
That pipe will be excavated by hand and will be protected by fitting a larger diameter twin wall culvert pipe over it to effectively provide a conduit for it to pass through above the road, below the road. So the road was then built up above this secondary protected pipe up to the required levels. So there will be, considerable cover of stone and soil, plus obviously the protected pipe, which will ensure that there's no damage caused to the supply pipe, which we understand is itself a plastic pipe, which is easy to repair or replace should any damage occur during the construction process.
And you've had this assessed as being sufficient to protect that pipe?
Sorry, say again?
You've had this assessed, the work you're going to do, you've had this assessed to say that it's going to protect that pipe?
The work as detailed in the outline risk assessment and method statement is a common approach we take in these situations, and no damage has occurred previously. The work is to be undertaken with particular controls in place, and the contractor to be involved is experienced in installing and maintaining private water supplies. So should any inadvertent damage occur to the pipe during those works, which again is primarily hand digging around the pipe, so very low possibility, but repairs can be undertaken immediately to rectify the situation.
Councillor Brown.
Many thanks for your presentation. I'm coming in behind Councillor Bailey Hearn's question. You've talked about obviously the construction side, but one of the points that was raised was the actual weight of vehicles going over this pipe, and you mentioned for 20 years. I mean, are we to take it then the extracting company will be liable for any repairs during that 20 years should the pipe break? It doesn't seem to be very deep, with tonnage of vehicles going over it.
So obviously the timber lorries will be exiting from the site fully loaded, so potentially up to 44 tonne mean gross weight. These timber lorries are designed for low ground impact, and in particular for this route, we are planning to use a technology on timber lorries which reduces tyre pressure and therefore increases the ground contact and of the tyres, and reduces the actual ground pressure that's applied. So that will spread the weight as it passes over the pipe on the new access road. The depth of construction for the access road, the stone that's built up at that point will be sufficient. It will probably be at least 450 to 500 mil depth, and that will provide sufficient protection to the pipe. Given the approach we are taking to create a conduit for the water supply pipe to pass through, then if that in any way fails, which is not deemed likely, but if it did, it would be fairly straightforward to repair if that need arised. And of course, where the pipe passes under the road, the new access road, then any damage that did occur to that in the future would be rectified.
Thanks very much.
Mr. Mann, there's no further questions, so you're free to go.
Vice Convener, I've requested a question in the chat.
I can't see one.
Yeah, definitely. I've shown on my screen, but nonetheless, I've got two quick questions, if it's okay just to proceed.
Please do, Councillor Forbes.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Mann. I've got two quick questions. One going back to the water supply. And you said in your opening statement that it wasn't deemed necessary to do a hydrological survey. Who deemed it not necessary, or who didn't deem it necessary, whichever way you want to look at that?
Do we still have Mr. Mann online?
Yes, sorry, I was still muted. So the question is who deemed it wasn't necessary to carry out the hydrological assessment?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that was a decision made by Tillhill as experienced forest managers and following the industry guidance on forestry operations and private water supplies.
Okay, thank you. My second question is following up on something was asked earlier. It's about the amount of lorries that will go over the, I think you specified sort of 5-year blocks over a 20-year period. Would those loads be spread evenly across the 5-year block, or would there be a lot of movement in the first year and then nothing for 4 years, or something similar to that?
Yes, so the timber harvesting operations will be carried out in sort of 5 or 6 month blocks once every 5 years. So because of the seasonal restrictions that are imposed on use of Glascory Road, we're only able to extract timber between beginning of March and end of November. So the plan will be to conduct the timber harvesting operations sort of from early spring through till late autumn to fit within that timescale. So in effect, for the first phase of felling, the 320 loads will be removed over a 5 or 6 month period, and we expect to average 4 loads a day, Monday to Friday, to achieve that. And that's taking into account an additional restriction of no more than 6 loads per day to use the road.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Mann, we'll just give it a second or two, because there certainly seems to be a glitch with their IT about questions coming. So we'll just give people who are online a chance to make a submission, if you don't mind.
Okay.
My apologies, Mr. Mann, about the previous mix-up there. There appears to be no further questions, so thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you, and I'll now hand you back to the convener.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you to the deputations. Do members have any questions for officers? Councillor Hearn.
Thank you very much. My question is based on the private water supply and the questions that I asked Mr. Mann. In the papers, you've got paragraphs 42, 43, 44. I want to know why a hydrological survey was not asked for, considering the council, in the beginning, didn't even know that the private water supply existed. We've got some debate on how deep the pipe is. Mr. Mann said he thinks it's about 1 metre deep. For me, 1 metre above that is not sufficient to protect a pipe. And we're not just talking about impact, we're talking about vibration. And we've then got conditions put on it on something we don't know. Essentially, we're putting conditions on something that we have no idea about because no survey is being carried out.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the situation here is that the proposal has been fully assessed. There's been a site visit by the public water supply team. A hydrological survey is related to a catchment zone. What we're talking about here is the passage of a track over a pipe. and there's a lot of information and detail there as to how the work would be undertaken in order to ensure that that pipe was not damaged as a result of either construction or future use. So in terms of proportionality and the requirement, the proposals that are set out in this application do not see the requirement for a hydrological survey related to the catchment area of the water in itself, because there is no impact from the proposal on that catchment.
So that wouldn't include, I mean, I'm not regularly on planning, so it wouldn't include the transmission of water from the collection site to the buildings where it's supplying. It's only on where the collection of water is based on, is it?
The proposals that are before us do not impact on the collection zone. The track in itself sits below the final intake point and tank, and only cross the pipe at a lower level. So what has been looked at in terms of industry standard, best practice, etc., is the construction and future maintenance of, which is set out within the risk assessment of that track, to minimise, if not eliminate, any impact on that pipework.
Okay.
Councillor Reid, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, convener. It's just to clarify, further to Mrs. Fleming's assertion that in 2017 the council had assessed the private water supply. I'm really quite confused as to how the council can then say that council officers can then say that the water supply was unknown or not known about. Could somebody clarify that for me?
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I think, again, it's the use of some words here. What the situation is, that the exact location, specification, etc., of the private water supply infrastructure was not fully set out in the documentation available to planning officers. But there had been a review previously. There's been a lot of correspondence back and forward on this. So it's maybe just a misinterpretation of what has been said.
Thank you. Can I just follow up on something else, convener?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's really following on from Bailey Ahern. Can I ask if the quality of the water will be monitored on a regular basis at the point of delivery to the houses?
That issue is controlled under separate legislation, and the involvement of the public water supply team within regulatory services deal with that. It falls out with the planning system.
So can I say that might be a yes or might be a no?
My understanding is that the public water supply team do undertake monitoring of public water, private water supplies.
Thank you.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it's just back on the question of private water supply. We talked about the concerns of the vibration and the pressure on the track, which might damage pipework. Condition 4, as I mentioned earlier, covers most of that, but it seems to cover more to do with the actual construction side of the track rather than ongoing. I'm just wondering, are we able to strengthen that up to ensure that the contractor is liable for all repairs and maintenance of that pipework? Is that possible? If so, could we strengthen that? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. I think condition 3 relates to the construction phase, but condition 2, which sets out that the development shall be undertaken in relation to the approved drawings, includes the risk assessment, etc., which covers those issues.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Before I ask for a motion, can I remind members that planning permission has already been granted for a route. This new route is a betterment to that previous route. So I will ask for a motion. Councillor Illingworth.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose the paper as it stands with an amendment to the transport movements from 6:30 to 8 a.m. I'm happy with the risk assessment undertaken by Till Hill, the developer, and I'm also happy that the mitigation measures will be effective.
Councillor Reid.
Happy to second Councillor Illingworth's motion.
Thank you. Do we have an amendment? Bailey Ahern, you have a question?
Yeah, if I put an amendment into refuse, does that mean it goes back to the original application? Okay, and I've not had sight of the original application, so I'm not going to be able to determine what's...
The original application is above the source of the water, the outlet. So, sorry? Oh, sorry. So this route, this new route is below it, so that it's not going to interfere with the intake, the outtake. So 50 metres further away.
So the original application would have an effect on the source of the water, may have, which is why the request for the hydrological survey would have been required for that one.
Maybe just to clarify on that final point there are controls through separate legislation out with the planning system to deal with damage, contamination, etc. to private water supplies that would deal with issues such as that. So it wasn't an element which was required to be considered through the previous application. But once concerns have been raised, the issue was looked at by the private water supply team within Perth and Kinross. There were concerns raised that there could be potential for issues associated to that private water supply. So the applicant has addressed that by routing the route below the intake point to avoid that issue, if that gives you clarity. But in terms of the planning permission, it remains in place for a routing that would be above the intake place, and that could be implemented without any further recourse through planning legislation.
Right, that's my concern. Okay.
Councillor Cuthbert, we're way past questions, but I've got one, so I might as well let the second one.
Thank you, Convener. It's actually a question about the motion. I'm just wanting to make sure that it's comfortable. I'm quite comfortable to support it, but are we able to condition the 6:30, the 8 o'clock start rather than the 6:30, or is it just applying to this bit of road? Does it apply to the whole length of the road? I'm a little bit unclear.
I think it's competent. I hadn't stopped to consider until you raised it. Is it only this section of the route that is limited by, I think for practical purposes, if 8 o'clock start time applies to this, it's going to have the effect of similarly limiting the whole of the operation. And I did hear that the applicant indicate that that was already their intention. They're content with it being adjusted to the 8 AM start. So it's certainly a lawful revision to the condition.
So maybe just to add to that as well, I'm sure the applicants are listening at the moment. What the situation is at the moment is there's a document submitted that sets out 6:30. It has been intimated that the applicants are prepared and offering an 8 o'clock start. All they would require to do is update that document. So they could update that document for both applications. But that would be within their gift. All we can do in relation to this application is apply a condition that says the document should be updated, but it would only be applicable to this section. But I think as my colleague Mr. Fox said, in effect, any vehicles travelling across this to access the second section down to the junction wouldn't be able to do so until 8 AM. But all it will require is the updating of that document to move from the industry standard, which we don't have an issue with, of 6:30 to 8 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We do not have an amendment, so do the members have any comments on the report? No comments. Therefore, planning permission is granted subject to conditions contained in the report of handling and the extra condition from Councillor Illingworth of the later start. Bailey Williamson.
Oh, there we go. It was just basically, as Christian mentioned about the private water supply. My comment was that people can actually request a testing of a public water supply as well. So it was just to give additionality to what Christian had said.
Thank you for that extra information. That's us for today. As I have no further business today, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and those watching online. Thank you.